From all indications, the Nigerian economy is no doubt facing tough times as macroeconomic challenges such as insecurities, fuel subsidies, forex scarcity, inflationary pressures, amongst others, are far from abating, causing severe hardship for the citizens and the business community. These are not the best times for many Nigerians who have, in the last few months, contended with lingering petrol scarcity and deteriorating power supply and inflation, with the situation currently compounded by the rush to meet the new deadline for withdrawals of old banknotes from circulation. Despite the extension of the deadline, anger and frustration have seemed to be the order of the day for many Nigerians across the country as the scarcity of the new notes continues to linger, with several bank customers becoming stranded due to the lack of access to the new notes, as retailers and traders have been rejecting the old notes amid long queues at ATM galleries across the country. Joining me via Zoom to look at this and, of course, other burning issues is a partner and chief economist at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Dr. Andrew Nevin. Dr. Nevin, good afternoon and thank you so much for your time on the program.
Oh, totally. You don't have to thank me. It's always a great honor to be with you. Great program.
Great. Well, let's start with understanding this cashless policy thing being pushed by Nigeria's Apex Bank. We seem not to have the infrastructure to carry all of this pressure, because on my way even to the office today, long queues at ATM galleries where people are trying to get the new notes, and it seems not to be available. Something seems to be wrong somewhere. What is your understanding of this process?
Well, I mean, I think we have to start with the perspective that the reasons for this policy don't have to do with kind of day-to-day economics. They have to do with someone in the political system wanting to take out the old Naira that was illicitly gained. Whether that exists or not, I mean, I'm sure it probably does exist. We all know the conditions here in Nigeria. So they designed a system with this very quick elimination of the existing Naira, which would force people to have illicit cash Naira to essentially forfeit that value. But that system is inconsistent with the daily trading of the Naira, trying to get the new Naira to people's hands, of getting Naira to people that don't have bank accounts in the far reaches in the entire country. And I think we're having a collision between those two objectives. I mean, obviously the pressure built up so much, as we all know, the CBN governor had to extend the time for the transition and extend the time to be able to take the old Naira and put it into the banking system. But yeah, it's very painful right now. And unfortunately, combined with the foil scarcity, we just have a situation where people are under enormous economic stress. They're having to spend huge amounts of time doing unproductive activities, and it's not helping the economy or the society.
Indeed, because if we look at some of the reasons cited by the CBN, promote financial inclusion, try to address issues around insecurity, illicit movement of funds, and all of this, do you see this as big? Can you take this for all of the challenges that we face? Can you justify the fact, with all of these reasons being cited by the Central Bank of Nigeria, Nigerians are really going through stress to get this note, honestly?
Well, justify, as I said, I mean, we have incompatible goals. We have one goal of the presidency, I think, being expressed to the CBN governor, which is to try to capture this illicit funds, prevent financial terrorist financing, if that's the goal. So basically, people that have large stashes of cash, why are they keeping it in cash? So the presumption on the part of the central bank and of the federal government of Nigeria is that you have billions of Naira in cash, it's because you're doing something illegal. So then you design a policy that addresses that and essentially says, look, in 8 weeks, this money ceases to be legal tender. You have to put it into the banking system. You want value, then you have to explain to the bank where it came from. So that logic, perfectly understand. I'm not a security expert, but I can understand that might make sense from a security perspective and from a financing terrorism perspective. But as I said, it's incompatible with a lot of individual Nigerians that are going about their day-to-day business that also use cash. They're not committing any crime. They go about their daily business. They're not following the news very much. They don't have a bank account. And all of a sudden now their lives are thrown into turmoil as they have to navigate through all of these issues, the long lines of POS or ATM or the lack of notes. I think what's a little not completely transparent to me, or maybe someone else knows better than I do, is why we don't have enough notes printed. I mean, the central bank controls the printing of notes. There's complaints about the commercial banks, hoarding the notes. That argument doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, the commercial banks have every incentive to put the new notes into circulation. People want the new notes, whether they get them in the bank or through the ATMs on that. So it's a very difficult situation. And again, it's one of these things. I mean, we talked about the acid strike. I mean, we never calculate the actual economic loss in these situations. So you take the acid strike, you look at the impact on the brain capital of the country of being 8 months or a year out of school. Also, just the psychological impact on the young people. It's immense, much bigger than the money that was actually being talked about to support the university system. Take the foil subsidy. Look at the amount of time people are spending in queues, the amount of foil people are spending in queues as their engines are running, waiting for to get it, getting it in small quantities, not being able to do their business, not just their time, but then they can't do their business, both because they are sitting in the queue, but then even after the queue, they don't have enough foil to necessarily do their business. Now we have a third example of this where people are spending immense amounts of time queuing up, and they get to the ATM line, and they never get any of the new notes anyway because the ATMs have a capacity constraint. So if you have a long lineup, it's never really going to run out before you get there. So all three of these things just show such a burden in our economy and society. I mean, just both in terms of time, in terms of lost productivity, and also in terms of psychological stress. I mean, all of us know our abilities to function properly, for our brains to function properly, it doesn't work if we're overstressed. So when we have these stressors in society, that also has a human and also an economic cost. So you add it all up, and it is a very difficult situation.
Well, let me follow up with the fact that the fiscal side is yet to really say something around this. You remember when this was instituted, the Ministry of Finance talked about not being carried along or not knowing much about it. But that was later swept under the carpet. But that brings me to the issue of synergy. How well do you see the monetary and the fiscal side of Nigeria's policy mix? How do you see them working side by side?
Well, I mean, I think both institutions, the Ministry of Finance and the CBN and the other parts of the financial system, and there's a coordinating committee for it. They work together. I think people sometimes say the lack of synergy. I don't think that's the biggest economic problem. I mean, we have structural issues that we refuse to deal with. And I don't think coming out and saying we need more coordination is the answer. In many ways, we need less coordination. We need entities to do what they're supposed to do, what they're fit for purpose to do on that. So I don't think we can lay the blame for our economic ills on the lack of coordination between the fiscal authorities and the monetary authorities.
Let's move to also another burning issue, which is the increase in rates. 17.5% is where the MPR stands. Now, that's after the January MPC meeting. And business people have continued to complain. Borrowing costs will definitely be on the high side, and this will not attract investors into the country. How are you reacting to this?
Well, again, so many times we have this conversation and we're talking about the consequences of something without talking about the root cause. I mean, obviously, interest rates are forced to go up. I mean, we have inflation over 20%, 21% in the last inflation report, if I remember correctly. I mean, by definition, the interest rate has to go up. In fact, the interest rates, we have negative interest rates. So we actually have low interest rates relative to our inflation rate. So it's not like we have a tight monetary policy from that perspective. What's going on? Why do we have inflation? Well, we have inflation, all the reasons that the viewers understand. One is insecurity. I mean, that drives up costs of everything. I mean, both because, for example, in the agricultural sector, people no longer plant, so there's less agricultural output. But even the output that you have to take extra precautions. There's extra costs involved in moving it, infrastructure challenges. So the fundamental issue is, why do we have inflation? And we have inflation because we continue to have kind of a harsh physical and regulatory environment for that. And unless we address those fundamental issues, there's nothing the Monetary Policy Committee can do. I mean, I've said over the years, MPC to me they've always made the right technical decision. I think it's one of the, maybe perhaps the most technically competent body that I'm aware of in the country. I have no problem with that. They always make the right decisions. So, but when people blame the MPC on interest rates, they have to go to what are the root causes of all of this. Unless we address the root causes of our productivity problems, of our infrastructure challenges, of our insecurity, we're never going to get inflation down. And if we don't get inflation down, we're never going to see the interest rates go down. I mean, as I said, at 21% inflation, 17.5% interest rate is actually a bargain.
Let's move further to ask you that The central bank also says that all of this moves is to get more money into the votes of the CBN. According to them, about 3.23 trillion naira is out there in money markets, is out of the banking system, and they want to get this monies back. And of the days given, I think about close to 2 trillion naira is back, but the Apex Bank believes more can come. But what really is the positive of having all of this monies, the CBN votes? How would that help maybe small businesses? Maybe what else? Can they divert this monies to other productive sources?
Well, I mean, again, I think there's a little bit of a fallacy in this. Remember, the central bank has the right to print money. So if I print money as a central bank and there's someone with illicit Naira, a billion illicit Naira just sitting in there, somewhere in their study, stashed away. In fact, I've essentially printed money for free. The money is not in circulation. At one level, it doesn't really even matter. I mean, if I think there's not enough money in circulation, mopping that money up isn't a necessity. I can simply print more money. So they didn't actually need to do this policy in my view. I mean, if they wanted to capture, to punish people that for illicitly gaining Naira that they're holding cash, I mean, I can see that. But in terms of strict economics, if you put Naira out into the market and then someone just stashes it away, that money is out of circulation. So it no longer contributes to inflation, no longer contributes to a productive economy. But it hasn't disappeared because you have the right as a central bank to create more Naira. So I think there's some kind of logical fallacy in some of this that we're talking about. As I said, I can understand from a security viewpoint wanting to turn this Naira into something that's worthless, essentially as a punishment to people who had it. But from an economic viewpoint, because you're the central bank, because you have the seniorage role, you can always create more money on that. So the concept of bringing it back in the banking system, to me, is a bit of a fallacy.
Well, a big one there. But before I let you go, I'm going to ask you what you think about government's fiscal position at this time. Let me say fiscal and debt position, which is what has made Moody's rejig. Of course, our ratings, we've been downgraded again. How did this come to you? And what will investors be looking at in 2023 following downgrades like this? We had one sometime in October.
Yeah, so I mean, we've said for years, I think back starting in 2016 when we first started having these discussions about the size of the debt. I mean, the PwC position was it wasn't a revenue problem, it wasn't a debt problem, it was a growth problem. We just had to have consistent growth in the economy, and we would find that our debt to GDP was quite small, and we wouldn't have any problem. Unfortunately, over those 7 years, we've had growth that is being uneven and is overall being below the population growth. So in effect, we've got poorer over those 7 years per capita. And the net result is now with the debt growing, we are starting to have a bit of an issue. So the downgrades are not a surprise. But I still think that what we need again is growth. So sometimes, I mean, we know from the Honorable Minister of Finance that she's very focused on revenue generation, but it's very difficult to generate more revenue in an environment where we're not growing. If we were growing 6 or 8% a year in real terms, we would be able to raise taxes 10 or 15% in real terms. If we were growing 10% in real terms, we'd be able to raise the tax take about 20% in real terms. And I think we need to stay focused on that. Unfortunately, we continue to be in this downward spiral. And the foil subsidy is destroying the economy, right? I mean, the scale of it, none of us can even keep track of it. I mean, the number that's quoted, I think, is 6 trillion naira for the foil subsidy in 2023. Obviously, I think now people widely understand that it's essentially a form of corruption. It's not a subsidy in any way that benefits the bottom of the pyramid. But the magnitude of it is immense. I mean, the official figures are around 200 trillion naira economy. So we're talking about almost 3% of the economy going in the foil subsidy. And of course, that's calculated at the official exchange rate. If you calculate it at the parallel rate, which would be the more accurate way to do it, it's even a bigger subsidy. So, and of course, the government recognizes this. I mean, the Honorable Minister of Finance came out many times and said we need to stop the foil subsidy. Many commentators have said the same thing. And the budget only includes the foil subsidy until the first half of 2023. So we recognize that needs to come out. The next government needs to deal with it. But in terms of restoring kind of fiscal balance and being able to solve the fiscal problems and also ignite growth, I mean, you just had the representative from IPMAN, how difficult it is with this entire foil corruption subsidy scheme. And the sooner it goes, the better we're going to be. So if the next government's able to deal with that, it'll go a long way to, I think, making a better economic environment. And we'll be able to get higher economic growth and be able to kind of reverse this a continual downgrade on that. But I mean, clearly this administration is nothing for the next government to deal with.
Well, our final question will be, yes, we're all talking about subsidy removal, and we know that once subsidy is out, a liter of PMS might go as high as 400 to 500 Naira, depending on where forex is being sourced by whoever is bringing in that product. That's on one side. What are we doing, or do you think we're ready to take the shocks that will come after subsidy removal? And your reaction to the deceleration in inflation for the month of December? Let's wrap up on that note.
Well, I mean, we're already taking the shocks. I mean, look at the immense cost of the foil subsidy. Nothing could be worse than what we're paying now. I mean, we had the transition to diesel at cost, and of course, when you say 400 or 500 Naira per liter of PMS if we remove the subsidy, and that's a terrible thing. But what makes that a terrible thing, again, going back to the fundamentals, is the Naira is so weak. So the only thing that's going to improve our situation is the Naira to strengthen, or at least to slow the deceleration of the Naira. Yeah, how does that happen? Well, that happens if we produce things that we can earn dollars or euros or Swiss francs or Japanese yen with. So we need to export more. What can we export? I mean, we put out the paper that said, look, given our physical infrastructure and the challenges, what we're best at exporting is services. And of course, 2/3 of the world economy is services. So let's focus on exporting services. We already export brains through the diaspora, but now we have the opportunity to export services while people remain in Nigeria. That's what we need to focus on. And if we could do that and stabilize the depreciation of the Naira, then we would also stabilize the oil price after the subsidy is removed. I mean, the reality is oil is a world product. It's going to have a world price. Whether we refine it or not, it's still going to have a world price. So we need a strong Naira in order to bring down the cost of oil for the average Nigerian. The only way we're going to have a strong Naira is if people want to have the Naira, which means we have to have something to export. The only thing that we can export are services. So that's where the focus should be. At least that's the perspective from PwC.
Well, it's a good way to leave it there. I've been speaking to Dr. Andrew Nevin, Partner Chief Economist, PricewaterhouseCoopers Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time on the show. We always appreciate your contribution.
Thank you, Tolo.
All right.